welcome back to the Local Marketing Beat, brought to you by Overall. We're having another special guest today. Such a fantastic topic that I want to get into. For that, we have Jes Scholz, growth marketing consultant, keynote speaker, and an SEO writer in the industry for well-known publications. I actually went through a few of your articles, Jes. So welcome to the show.
Thank you all for having me on.
Yeah, we're excited to talk about this, right? We're talking about AI agents changing shopping, obviously GEO and everything that's happening in AI search. And I was actually reading your article on, I think you did some research on 100 conversations with ChatGPT, using it as an agent mode to see how it reacts for shopping. So why don't we start there? How did that go? Can you tell us a little bit about that experiment for anybody that is listening? And then we can jump into some questions that I wanted to ask you.
Well, I think overall it went rather poorly. Not the experiment, but the performance of website. We saw very clearly we're not very good at designing for humans even at this point. And if it's not good at design for humans, then these agents have even more trouble. So they couldn't understand how to use the forms. They couldn't load up the pages. It loaded too slow. And so there was a lot of reasons for an agent to abandon a site, even market leading websites where you think they would have been a little bit more in front of the times. And so what we need to understand is if it's not usable for a human, it's not usable for an agent, and we need to be investing much more into user interface than making it pretty.
Yes. And I mean, the websites, I like the word pretty, right? The websites that you were looking at are very well known, modern looking, and sometimes we overcomplicate design just to make it look prettier or fancier. And I was seeing the screenshots that you were sharing where the agent was just not even able to filter products, and it was not able to even find what you were asking. So I guess we're going to get into this whole mentality of, do we need to simplify the UI of a website, a retailer, or an online experience to the point where it has to be very, very simple, intuitive for the user, but even more so for AI agents?
I think we need to let the UI experts do their job. A lot of the time when people are designing a user interface, the UI expert will propose something and then it will go through multiple rounds of executive reviews. And no offense to executives, but a lot of the time they get caught up in minute details. They want the corners of the images to be round. But in order to have the corners of the images round, you have to introduce another 17 lines of JavaScript. And you put that in the critical rendering path. And you need to really understand, are those round corners that important that you're going to add another second of load time, that you're going to annoy AI agents, that you're going to hurt your conversion rates because of why? And so I think there's a lot of conversations that need to be had by the technical teams and the experts responsible for designing these UIs back to their management or back to the hippo to say, look, it's your decision ultimately. You can have what you want, but we want to make you aware of the fact that we tested it. And if you want your round corners, it costs you half a second of page load speed and agent conversions reduced by 5%. Would you still like it? And if you give them that level of information, I would presume most executives will turn around and say, oh, no, of course not.
Who
but
cares?
I feel that right now we're designing to make it pretty, rather than designing for functionality. And we're not being serious about how we test this, neither from a human user perspective, nor running it through agent protocols.
And I mean, we all love those rounded corners. I'm guilty of that, but I hear you, right? It's additional code that you're putting stress on, especially at the speed of these agents, right? You go into ChatGPT and you say, hey, shop for me for a black V-neck t-shirt. I mean, it has to be fast, right? We're talking like milliseconds, and you're slowing. You have a website that takes 5 seconds to load. It's just going to skip it, right? It's like, I don't have time to waste waiting for your page to render with all the pretty, rounded corners of your images. And so can you tell us a little bit more about what were some of the tests? Was there any of the tests that was successful, that you were actually able to shop or order anything?
Some of them did come through as successful, but it was a very low conversion rate. And that's concerning when you think that the agent is specifically tasked to do nothing but convert. One would expect across the birth of the internet that eventually it would have 100% conversion rate. That wasn't the case. There were some
Mm-hmm.
tasks where it could not find a single website in order
Wow.
to actually be able to convert. Now, this testing was done late last year, so we're a little bit more agentic friendly. There's a little bit
Right.
more awareness, and we are seeing new protocols coming through. So Google just announced that they're encouraging a new open standard called Web MCP, for example, where you
Mm-hmm.
would build into the headers of your website these APIs which communicate what the website will do. So if you're a travel website, you would say, on this page, you can book these hotels at these rates with these packages. And so
Okay.
that's going to help that communication to the agentic web. But with anything, like we've had schema for over a decade and we still have websites that don't have it adopted.
Yes.
So it's definitely going to be a case of, are you on top of this? Are you on that cutting edge of logical implementations, not jumping on every single bandwagon?
Mm-hmm.
And how are you then going to benefit from that as a brand and increase your market share?
You'll be surprised how many websites we run into, enterprise level with no schema at, not even homepage, but specifically local pages that don't have any schema. And we just spent a whole episode, the previous episode, if you didn't watch it, you can go, go into the YouTube channel, but we just spent an episode talking about schema. So it's the same thing as design, right? You would think that it's something that is well adopted, and this sounds like a really cool concept, but I'm sure it's going to take some time to even get adoption and sell the idea to executives, right? One thing that I wanted to talk about was obviously, I think it was like 2 years ago, we started talking about, hey, can you imagine one day you ask ChatGPT for recommendations for local business? And we're there now. So now it's like, can you imagine, somebody that, an agent, whatever, ChatGPT, does all your shopping for you, like orders your groceries and acts like an actual half of a human, right? Like an actual assistant could order things. But then the first thing that comes to mind is like, what do you think is going to happen to brand loyalty if it's an agent that is just chasing prices, right? It's like, oh, I want to save my users, I'm just going to go to random stores. How do you think that that's going to affect brand loyalty?
I don't think it's going to affect brand loyalty
Okay.
significantly because unless you've told your agent either through explicit prompts or through your previous purchasing behavior that you are extremely price conscious, it's
Mm-hmm.
not going to follow those patterns. It's going to follow the patterns of brand loyalty that either it's seen in your behavior or
Mm-hmm.
it's seen on the mass buying behavior. Now, the outcome of that is that if a user is new to a category, it's going to follow the existing market patterns. So what we're looking at is a re-emphasis of market leaders. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you are in position one in the market, you're in a very happy position right now, unless you're not taking care of your agentic experiences, because all of the corpus, all of the visibility, everything that this agent has access to, unless it's got individual user preference or prompts otherwise, is saying to go and purchase from you. And that will
Mm-hmm.
become a self-fulfilling prophecy unless you get in the way. If you're not the market leader, I would see agentic as an excellent opportunity to become that, because it doesn't matter what is the offline reality, because an agent can't see that. What
Right.
matters is the digital reality that they work in. And so if you can start to influence that digital reality through citation targeting, through understanding of preferences through these APIs that the agents are utilizing, which is different to SERP rankings, that's got different algorithms on top, you can start to position yourself as the market leader even if you're not in reality. And that's going to
Mm-hmm.
become a really interesting competitive advantage and a skill of digital marketing.
Yeah, and I would like to ask you what would be your, step one, two, three to become that market leader if it was a brand that's up and coming, they're competing against the big guys. Where would you start? Like, I know you do consulting. So if this was your client, where would you start? What would you say?
The first place that I start is setting your measurements, because if you don't have a metric to be able to measure against, you're just throwing things away in the wind. So
Yep.
I like to use share of search as that, and there's many tracking tools that you can use. Share of search for me combines traditional search and AI search. I would never look at AI search alone or any tracking tools that are just like, here's just your ChatGPT visibility, because a lot of AI agents will be run by Google as well through Gemini. We've got most of it coming through the Chrome browser. This is not a ChatGPT question. This is a wider internet question, and you need to be in a position where you're monitoring multiple surfaces and understanding your share of voice across those entireties of the different corpuses. Once I establish share of search, and through that process, you're going to be understanding what are the category entry points, like what are my key topics that I need to be present on. I would be understanding who's currently dominating that conversation. I'll be looking at who's getting most of the citations, who's getting most of the visibility in traditional search results, who's being pulled as number one when the agents query the APIs. And then you can start doing your traditional digital marketing tactics to target those placements. You need to increase your digital PR. You need to make sure you're very clear on your core value propositions. You need to make sure that they're lived through your customer reviews and managing any negative reviews, because what a lot of these agents are looking for is balance. They'll look for positives and look for negatives. Same with citations. You'll see that either Google or ChatGPT, if you ask about a specific brand for its is it good, it tries to present both sides of the story. You want to ensure that you're managing both of those sides. And then it's just increasing that share of voice through that either citation targeting or placement targeting, no matter the surface. And that a lot of the time brings us into the social sphere as well as your traditional website sphere, because it's more than just the Google index or the Bing index. Now we've got so many different indexes also from TikTok and Instagram, or all of Meta, that we need to be factoring in.
It really just, GEO, I see it, there's a couple of things that I want to say, but I see it as the way that it brought the whole internet together, right? Where it's no longer like social media by itself, and then the manager that's posting on Google Business Profile, and they don't talk to each other, and everybody's running around. There needs to be that GEO role that controls everything, right? And also known as LPL, trying to control all these different things, because GEO is, like you said, it's not just the one agent or even not just the AI tools, which is kind of why also brings me back to, are you calling it AI SEO? Are you calling it GEO? What's the latest on the street on this? Because it's such a contradictory term, right? Because I mean, it's obvious to call it AI SEO, but at the same time, what if later there's a new tool, a new tactic, a new platform, right? So how are you calling it when you're referring to this in keynotes and in interviews?
I call it AI SEO. I don't like the term GEO because we're not optimizing for generative engines when we're talking about agents. Those are completely different technologies. That space does have AI in common, and I think it's important to understand that this is not a new discipline. This is an expansion of what we were already doing under the terminology of SEO, which I understand is also not search engine optimization anymore, but the term's kind of grown beyond that to include many other surfaces as well. So my personal preference is calling it AI SEO, understanding that's an expansion of what we're already doing, which is purely just an expansion of digital marketing, which was always tied back to branding in the first place. I don't get too lost in the naming, like a rose by any other name.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
And you mentioned briefly metrics, which brings me to Google Analytics. I know you wrote about GA4. Very difficult right now, challenging, is messy. So is there any tips or tricks that you have on how are you tracking, success, but also momentum, right? Because in SEO, usually rankings could help us get a sense of impressions, and then impressions will get us clicks. And then from there, we can optimize conversions. But in this case, it's a whole different ballpark, right? It's like there's no impressions, there's no metrics. They can convert without visiting your website. The 0 clicks is a whole different animal. What is your take? Like, what are you doing to track momentum and success?
So for me, there's 2 points that matter, presuming you're a for-profit business. That's going to be like share of voice, whether that's share of search if you're optimizing for search, share of voice on social platforms. It's essentially share of whatever surface you're trying to dominate. What I like about that is it includes competitive context in a way that Google Search Console, Bing Webmaster Tools, GA4, they have no competitive context. So if in your Google Search Console you see clicks go up 5%, you might be thinking you're doing a fantastic job. But then if your CMO has the context that the entire market has grown 20% and you've only grown 5%, that CMO is really upset with you. And so having that competitive context is very important. You need to, though, tie that into real business metrics, because I can be talked about a lot, but that doesn't necessarily translate to more revenue in all cases. So essentially, I'm looking at that very top of the funnel, what's going on with the share of voice. I'm looking at the bottom of the funnel, what's happening with my market share, which I would define as like your total sales, total revenue that you're making, and then have those two correlate together is the goal. When I get more share of search, then not immediately, but a few months down the line, I should see an increase in my revenues. And if that's not the case, then I'm doing the wrong thing in terms of managing that conversation.
Yeah, there's something broken somewhere. There was a recent conversation I had with a small restaurant chain down here in Texas. And again, difficult to prove how AI SEO and how they were being recommended, but it's hard to prove it on a dashboard and a report. And they started noticing that people were walking into the restaurant well educated on the menu. So they started ordering the pricier, the fancier dishes. So more of the, not the traditional salad, but the signature, right? Like what they came up with. And they walked in, instead of expecting to just have a beer, they knew there was a full cocktail bar. So they were expecting cocktails. And once they looked at the revenue, they saw that most average tickets were up by 40%. And it's like, well, there you go, right? It's like, this is hard. Like, you have to look everywhere because you don't know. And every industry is different too. I mean, if it's food, I don't know. How do you personally pick a restaurant? Are you actually using AI agents for yourself?
I don't use AI agents for my restaurants. I'm still very traditional. I use Google Maps.
Oh,
But
interesting.
yeah, I use AI agents for more complex purchases. For me, the effort of sending an agent for restaurants would be too high when it's easier for me to use the traditional ones because they give me a quick, good, easily filterable result.
Yeah.
If it's something that's a more complex purchase where I would traditionally have gone onto multiple websites and done half
Yes.
an hour of browsing,
Yeah.
that's where I now will have the agent do that browsing on my behalf and bring me back two or three options.
Yeah, and that's the cool part. Some industries require, for you to go to their website and still check them out. That's how you can track them. But specifically restaurants or physical locations, they don't need to go to the website. They have the address. They can click on the map and go straight, right? And so it's just this. It's fascinating, but I think there's a lot of conversations there on like, how are we eventually going to attribute this, right, and track it. I
I
don't
think
know what's your take
that's
on this, but we're talking about look at everything, but most companies have everything separate, right? Like CRM does one thing, they have another thing for revenue. And so like, how do they do that, right? Do you see a day that it is going to be essential to put all the systems together so they can actually look at it?
no, because the
No.
systems aren't compatible. They're completely
Yeah.
different metrics. Like, even if you're just trying to standardize across your social platforms, how they measure reach and impressions and clicks is fundamentally different. You
Mm-hmm.
can't put an apple in a bucket with an orange and then call it a banana. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
not how these things work. I think we as digital marketers need to recognize that we've been blinded by metrics at the expense of forgetting KPIs.
Yeah.
And we've been communicating metrics to our executive teams that are just vanity metrics. I, why do you care about impressions? in Google Search Console? Why do you care about sessions in GA4? You need to understand that there's things that are directionally valuable for market share, and those things are not impressions and sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I hope we will see a return to important KPIs of marketing that the digital sphere has forgotten for a long time. These are share of voice. These are things that we have a lot of experience tracking, this untrackable path, but knowing that there's value in it. From all of the above the line advertising, all of the Mad Men era, they didn't have Google Analytics 4, yet they knew if their campaign worked or not.
Yeah.
And a lot of the digital sphere, we complain, well, why do they still invest so much money in television? Why do they still invest so much money in local newspaper ads? They invest it because it works.
Yeah.
And it's proven to work time and time again for decades and decades, and that's not going to change. The digital guys, we got lost in the swamp of metrics that we had available, and we need to come out of that and begin focusing on true North Stars that actually matter.
So I want to ask you, if you have any actionable insights, what would you tell a CMO to focus on when we're talking about AI SEO and all these things for the next 12 months? What should be priority number one for them?
Priority number one is ensuring that there is a clear correlation between the way you have set up your AI search tracking and your share of market. Because a lot of the time, the people who have set up the AI search tracking have gone into their Google Search Console or Bing Webmaster Tools, looked at what queries that they're ranking for, put those queries into AI, and now they have a 40% share in AI search. I'm like, you've just set up a focus group where you've walked out to your customer base, got your best customers, put them in a room, and then ask them, do you like our product? Of course, the answer is yes. You've introduced so much bias into that system. And if you do that, what you're not going to see is any correlation whatsoever between your share of search in AI platforms and the market share that you are enjoying as a brand. What you need to do is restructure that and make sure it's as unbiased as possible. So have those hard conversations about who are actually our competitors, what is actually our category entry points, and how does that translate into grounding queries. Put those grounding queries at a decent scale into an AI tracker, track that across all of the different meaningful for your business AI platforms, including AI mode and AI overviews, because those are still the two big hitters, significantly more than ChatGPT, despite all of the hype. And then have that honest conversation about where are we. And if you don't see a correlation with that AI share of voice and your market share, with AI share of voice being a leading indicator, then you've still got the tracking incorrect. When you see that correlation, now you can start optimizing, because now you have a metric. You know, if I increase this in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, whatever the lag is, because there's always a lag between marketing and impact, whatever that lag is, I'm going to see that come through in my market share.
And it goes back to what you said earlier, is like, if you don't set testing, you're going to go in and start creating content or editing or, publishing things, and you're just not going to be able to catch, did it work? Did it not work? Right? So it can go south very, very quickly. But Jes, I really want to thank you for your time, for joining me on this episode. For anybody that is watching and want to learn or follow your work, learn more about what you're working on, how can people get a hold of you, contact you, or even just follow your articles?
Yeah. So I publish my own newsletter. It's called SEO Brief on Substack. That's where I'll go into more of my deep thinking. If you want more bite-sized snackable stuff, I publish on LinkedIn every week in general, if I'm not too busy, with whatever I'm thinking of that week. So it's generally tied into whatever work I'm doing at the time. And then I'm going to start with videos soon being at some point this year. So I'll announce that on LinkedIn when I finally get to it.
That's awesome. I'll keep an eye out for it. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye.